pronouncing this as Dia. She plays a blind woman who, her and Gwynplaine are pretty much in love through the movie. And it's such a wonderful love story.
So Gwynplaine is left behind by
the Comprachicos.
Correct. And now he's walking through the gallows, which is fantastic imagery.
It's incredible cinematography. Now, really quickly, we need to talk about why they left him behind.
Yes. So there was debate. One of them was like, we got to take him because like we've been paid. Like, he's money.
Yes.
The other ones are like, we don't want to carry around evidence of the crimes that we've been committed that we are being banished for.
Exactly.
And they kind of physically overwhelm the Comprachicos who wants to take them, and that is Dr. Headcanon? No, Hardcanon.
And so when you look at his name, he's the dastardly surgeon.
Correct.
And so if you look at the name, it looks like Hard QAnon.
Yeah. Which
we were like, that can't be right. But yes, it is actually pronounced as Hardcanon.
Yeah.
And so this is such an incredible scene because we see Gwynplaine, the child, who
played by Julius Molnar.
Yes. He is walking through the gallows, and it's very snowy and everything, and he comes across a woman who he is checking to see if she's alive. She's cold to the touch. Mm-hmm. And he finds the baby that she is holding is still alive. And so this wonderful, wonderful, 10-year-old boy, isn't he 10?
I think he's supposed to be younger than that.
Okay. But we find this wonderful little boy who was just thrown away by pretty much the only people that he at this point knew.
Yeah, because he wanted to go with the Comprachicos.
He did.
Because it's all he had known.
Yeah, it's all he had known. He had been sold to them. He knows what they did to his face, but at the same time, that's all he knew. Yeah. You know what I mean? So he was like, why can't I go with you? Meanwhile, we should also mention that you don't see Gwynplaine's full face.
Correct. He's wearing a scarf to cover up his scars.
Yeah. So.
And then he finds Ursus, the philosopher, which is great.
Yes.
Because Ursus describes himself as Ursus, the philosopher.
And Ursus has a dog who pretty much saves the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
What's the dog's name?
The dog's named Homo. Yes,
but not in the obviously not in the sense of we know it as.
Correct. There is so there's a Latin saying, "Homo homini lupus," which is a man is a wolf to another man, and apparently that is a play on that. So the dog. I think it's interesting because he's essentially calling the dog a human.
Yes, exactly. So hey, human.
Yes.
So we see Gwynplaine now meets Ursus, and Ursus is a main character throughout the film.
Mm-hmm. So Ursus takes in Gwynplaine and the baby that Gwynplaine found.
But he doesn't know that he has the baby yet.
Correct. The baby is Dia.
The baby is Dia, yes. Mm-hmm. The baby is Dia. So that is how Gwynplaine and Dia meet. And so right now, Gwynplaine announced, I'm Gwynplaine, I'm cold and I'm hungry, can I please come in? Ursus takes in the child, not knowing that the child has a baby. And so he unwraps his coat. Ursus moves him aside and says, "Oh my God, there are two of you," which is pretty funny. And so he's now examining the child, and
we should be clear that Ursus does not look like a kindly guy who you'd be like, "Oh, this guy's gonna raise two infants." No big deal.
No.
He looks like a fucking lunatic.
Yes, he does. He absolutely does. And so he starts to examine the baby, and he realizes the baby Dia is blind. And we should also mention, they named Dia. They didn't know her name.
No, that's true.
Yeah, they named Dia. Ursus just realizes she's blind, and young Gwynplaine removes his facial scarf, and Ursus tells Gwynplaine, stop laughing, I say. And Gwynplaine says, I'm not laughing. And that's when you realize that this poor young boy's face has been altered by the Comprachicos. Yeah. And this is who you realize is your laughing man.
Yep. And it's pretty horrifying looking on a child.
It is. It's very creepy.
Very modern day Pennywise looking, if that makes sense.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see that.
Something with the buck teeth, I think.
Okay. Okay. I won't fight that.
Yeah. So this movie was originally intended as a vehicle for Lon Chaney.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It was actually on the table to be made before Phantom of the Opera.
Wow.
But they didn't secure the film rights in time.
Okay.
And so they rewrote Lon Chaney's contract, and he was like, let me pick the movie, and he ended up
Yeah.
picking Phantom. So that's when they
Okay.
went into that.
Got it.
And then they ended up getting the film rights for this a couple years later, and then actually delayed the release by a year to go back through and add the sound effects and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we fast forwarded quite a bit to where Gwynplaine is now an adult, as is Dia, and you get to see Gwynplaine's face as the Laughing Man for pretty much the first time.
Yeah. And they are essentially a traveling sideshow at this point.
Yeah.
So Ursus has written plays. He describes himself as Shakespeare, but better, which is, I love Ursus.
Yes, Ursus is pretty great.
Yeah, I think especially upon this viewing, I appreciate how fucking much of a lunatic he is.
And I mean,
but in a good way.
He raised 2 children that just showed up at his doorstep. You know what I mean? So, you know, you're doing the best you can in quote unquote the 17th century, which
Yes.
we should also mention that even though they have this setting as the 17th century, the makeup and the hairstyles are very 1920s.
Absolutely.
Very, very 1920s. So, you know, you appreciate the attempt, but you can still very much tell that this is a film in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you first get to see them all as adults and see Ursus as an older gentleman, with Gwynplaine walking alongside the carriage. Dia's inside because she's blind.
So they actually have a neat...
Neat little setup.
Yeah, the wagon that they have is very cool looking.
It is really cool.
It almost looks like, to me, like a witch's shack.
Yeah.
Like in the
On wheels.
But like, yeah, plopped up
Yeah.
and out. And there's this other very cool caravan.
That's coming right now. And it literally looks like a semi before semis were a thing.
So with the scenery that they're in this scene, I get a very Hobbit hole vibe from it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And that it's like a traveling Hobbit hole.
It really is. I'm really glad you said that because I had that in my brain. I
Yeah.
was like, that looks like whatever those little Hobbit houses are called. Okay, so the process of carving a victim's face to look like it's smiling broadly has come to be known as Glasgow grin, or a Chelsea smile, after organized crime rings in those 2 British cities used such mutilation as a terror tactic. It is also similar to the Joker toxin from the Batman comics, since it leaves a grotesque smile on the victims' faces. So it's any time that you're going to look up facts about a movie, if it relates to any kind of comic book in any way, shape, or form, it's going to keep going back to that comic book.
Yeah, and even the version of the DVD that we bought, the Amazon listing for the DVD that we bought actually said the story that inspired the Joker.
Yep.
And that's just a weird way to put it in the listing.
Yeah. Because the story doesn't, it's not the story that inspired the Joker, it's just the face.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know that the 2 audiences intersect that much for people who are going to watch a 1920s silent movie. So, yeah, I don't know. There is also a Blu-ray version.
Whatever.
It's a Kino restoration. So
And how much is it really restored?
Well, they
Whatever.
worked off of like 3 or 4 different prints.
Sorry, I got very annoyed
yes,
there.
You did.
I
That's
don't
all right.
like Blu-ray. I don't like
know
Blu-ray.
You don't, but for the purpose of restoration and preservation, I do think it has merits as a medium. But that's whatever.
Sure.
Yes. And as we keep getting higher picture quality televisions, they're going to keep putting out new media to go with it. It's a fucking racket, but whatever. So Kino did put a Blu-ray out that was restored. That is not the version that we are watching.
No.
Because I believe it did go out of print and is very expensive.
Here's the thing, though. Assuming its copyright is not lapsed already, the Man Who Laughs and all others produced in 1928 will enter the U.S. public domain in 2024. So we may actually in 2 years' time, we may actually have this as a streaming movie.
Yeah.
So that would be really cool. I mean, we're 2 years off the mark, but hey, why not?
Hey, in 2 years, someone could be listening to this episode for the very first time.
So I will tell you, too, another fun fact about this. Author Ray Bradbury remembers seeing this movie when he was a kid, and that the ending brought him to tears. And years before his passing, he had the opportunity to see it again, and he said that it still works, and the ending brought him to tears yet again.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie just inspires so many people that have created content that we know and love today. So I think it's really important that, you know, we do these movies and we go back in time and look to see what has inspired our favorite stories and some of our favorite characters. I fucking love the Joker. Like, I prefer the Joker over any other villain, and I prefer the Joker versus like any other Marvel or DC story. Like, the Joker story is phenomenal to me because it's such a mystery, you know.
Well, I'm a huge dork for Guillermo. God, I can't say his fucking name. Guillermo del Toro.
It's funny that we say Guillermo because the gentleman that we're looking at right now, surgeon Dr. Hardkanon, he looks like Laszlo from What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, I'm a huge dork for Guillermo del Toro.
Guillermo del Toro.
Right. And this movie and a lot of these kind of classic stuff absolutely influenced the look of his stuff.
Okay, so also, we should talk about, this isn't like your typical scary movie.
No, it's a gothic horror.
It is a gothic horror, so it's more heartbreaking than it is actually terrifying. But there are some very concerning scenes in here that you're just kind of like, ooh, maybe don't do that. One of them is where, and we'll be introduced to her in just a little bit, the Duchess. So they're going to this carnival style. It's a fair. I should say.
Right.
Let me rephrase. It's a fair.
And it's not a fair like we think of fairs.
No.
It's a much rowdier event.
It's a Southwark WARK fair. And again, this is medieval times, so of course, like, their fairs, just think of, you know, those Renaissance fairs that you go to.
Yeah.
Except like 10 times more aggressive. So there's a scene where the Duchess is just walking through the fairgrounds and she's being just groped and groped. These men we saw her first, and any time that she walks away, they immediately like just pull her by her dress, pretty much.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the descriptors, God, I cannot fucking talk today. Interestingly enough, when the Duchess is in this fair, it's described as her cavorting, and she doesn't appear bothered by it.
No.
She's full, like, she's game.
Yeah, she's about it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, okay, fine. But, like, I don't know.
Even her reaction to Gwynplaine. Oh, absolutely.
Too many hands.
It's very touchy-feely.
I don't like to be touched at the best of times.
And I saw it and I was like, whoa, bro.
Yeah.
That's a little handsy.
Yeah. Like, I'm a yoga teacher and I don't want to touch anybody. I don't want people touching me. Don't just hands belong to you.
Right.
Not on anybody else.
Yeah. If I want you in my personal space, I will invite you.
Exactly. If I don't get in it. That's why, like, I think the whole stand 6 feet away from each other should have been implemented years ago.
Yeah.
Like
from year 0?
Dude, no one should stand that close to one another. I don't need you all up in my business. Back up. It's 1 cart length away from me.
So we are now seeing Gwynplaine kind of... So he has that permanent smile, but as the caravan...
it's a terrifying smile.
It is horrific.
The dentures really are. I mean, he did incredible with the denture choice.
So the caravan is pulled up to a town, and the townspeople know that he is coming, and they are...
They've heard about him.
They're clamoring to see him.
Yeah,
so they start surrounding the caravan and, like, pounding the door and calling his name.
Yeah.
And he's...
But they don't call Gwynplaine. They don't know his actual name.
No, they call it Laughing Man.
Yeah.
And he knows that they want to see him because of his deformity, and he's bothered by it.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful performance because he has that permanent smile.
But he's crying.
Yeah. And one of the things that I saw was, like, when you take away an actor's mouth, that's a huge portion of what they act with.
Yeah. Oh,
even in silent films. Because even as we're watching this, everyone else is mouthing dialogue and moving their lips. And there's Barkilphedro, the King James's court jester.
And he's the creepiest fucker. We have to talk about him for a minute because he is the most unsettling part of this movie. Like, you'd think it would be the actual Laughing Man himself, but no. the jester, King James Jester, and we have to say King James has now died.
Yes.
And
the jester has moved up to a
queen.